Hey guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be bringing you my June book haul and my July TBR. Starting off with my haul, first up I got two books from Book of the Month. This month, first is Half Sick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian. This is Laura Sebastian's adult fantasy debut. She's previously written the Ash Princess trilogy, which is YA fantasy. So this is her adult debut, and this is a retelling of Arthurian legend from the point of view of the Lady of Shalott. And so I don't know much about the Arthurian legend, if we're being honest. All my knowledge pretty much comes from the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail and the TV show Merlin, and that's kind of it. And so I'm definitely interested to read this one. I think it sounds pretty good. The second book I got from Book of the Month this month is Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I have heard a lot of good things about this book from other booktubers, and so I don't usually read YA mystery, but I thought I'd give it a shot. And this is about a girl named Donis who is part of the Ojibwe tribe in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and she witnesses a shocking murder and ends up getting entangled with the FBI investigation of this murder, as well as this new drug that's kind of been around the area, as well as some other cities. And so she's kind of called on to help with both her chemistry knowledge as well as her knowledge of the Ojibwe kind of traditional medicine practices to help kind of figure out what exactly this new drug, where it comes from, as well as the murders. And so I have read this already. I read it pretty quickly after receiving it, and so you'll hear more about my thoughts on this in my upcoming wrap-up video. Next, I purchased two ebooks this month. The first ebook I got is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This is the sequel to Fireborn, which I read earlier in June, and you will hear more of my thoughts on it in my wrap-up, and I liked it, so I went ahead and got the second one to start reading. So this series takes place, I think it was about 10 years after a bloody revolution where this ruling class was overthrown, and now in this new regime, instead of the dragon riders, who were kind of the pinnacle of society and the governing body, being only like blood right, now anyone, including lower class, lower born citizens, can test in to this dragon rider corps. And our two main characters are both members of this corps. They're rising stars, and so much of the book follows their quest and kind of the competition to see who gets named like the commander of these dragon riders, as well as when some opposition to this current regime starts appearing, what happens with that, and kind of how the current governing body kind of reacts to that and on. And so I really liked the first one, and so I'm excited to read the second one. I also got a freebie romance book that I found on my BookBub deals called Player by Staci Hart. I had never heard of this book, and I've heard of this author a little bit, so I thought it was free, so I'd pick it up. But it's about a romance between a woman and her bass instructor. And that's kind of all I know about it, but I kind of thought the cover was cute, and it was free, so I picked it up. And then lastly, for my book haul, I received 4 books from my mom as kind of a belated birthday gift at the beginning of the month. First is The Heiress Gets a Duke by Harper St. George. If you have been watching my videos, you might remember that this was my favorite read of April, and so I read a library copy, so I decided I wanted to have a copy to own myself because I really loved it. And so this is a Gilded Age historical romance about an American heiress named August who's more interested in working for her family's ironworks company than getting married, and so her family ends up setting up a marriage between her little sister and this duke who needs money, and so he's marrying the little sister to get access to their fortune, but August does not want her little sister to get conscripted into a loveless arranged marriage, and so she's trying to step in and prevent it. And when the duke meets August, he decides August is the one he actually wants to marry. And so again, I love this book. If you want to hear more on my thoughts, I will link the video in which I talk about it. Next, I got a historical fiction called The Last Queen by Signe Pike. This is a historical fiction that takes place, I think, in the 6th century Scotland, that I believe is also kind of a loose retelling or reimagining related to Arthurian legend, because I think one of the main characters in this book is the sister of Merlin, and it's kind of about this forgotten queen. And so I thought it sounded really good, and I guess this is the second book in this haul that have been related to Arthurian legend, so maybe this is a new trend for me. Who can say? But this is one of those books that I see in the bookstore every time I go in, and every time I'm like, that looks good, I should get it. Let's keep not. So I'm glad that I finally have a copy, and I'm definitely excited to read it. And the last 2 books I got are both horror books, which is, if you told me like a year ago I'd be getting horror books, would be surprising, because I used to say I didn't like horror. And I'm still not super into horror, but I have found, after kind of reading a couple books over the past year and a half or so that could be considered horror, that there's some that I'm into. So I'm dabbling a little bit now, and the first of those is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So this is about a group of ladies in 1990s suburban in their book club, and then one day this mysterious man shows up who may or may not be a vampire. And I've heard good things, heard this book is good, and I think if I like this, I might delve into more of Grady Hendrix's books, because his horror books all seem like kind of comedy horror just based on the vibes I get from them, and so that could definitely be something I might be more interested in, but this is the one I wanted to start with. And last up, I have Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is like a gothic boarding school horror, which sounds awesome. For being honest, that setting is like, sounds perfect for me. And so in the past, around I think the 1900 around, there was these two girls at this boarding school in New England who end up mysteriously dying. And eventually this boarding school closes a couple of decades later, and I think there's a couple other kind of mysterious incidents as well. And then current day, someone writes a book about the history of this closed boarding school, and that book inspires, I think, a movie to be filmed about it. And when they open back up this campus to film this movie, they start, like memories of the past start popping up, and I think mysterious things start happening. So I'm very excited for this one. In addition, this book has like illustrations in it, which I think is just so cool. That's just so fun. You just don't get illustrations in adult books very often. I think that's just the coolest. So I think that'll be fun. Okay, so that's it for my haul for June. Next up, I have my July TBR, and so last month my TBR was very long because I was doing the shelf space readathon and I wanted to have books picked out for every prompt. And so this month I'm doing a much smaller TBR, because after reading from that list all month, I'm feeling a little bit more mood readery, and I'm not really sure a ton of what I want to read, but I do have a couple. I have one buddy read that I'm planning on reading, and then I have 3 others that have just been kind of like crossing my mind recently, but that weren't on my readathon TBR, so I think I'm going to throw those on, and that'll be my 4-book TBR for July. So starting with the buddy read, I have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a Shelf Space Discord buddy read, and this is the first in a trilogy that I've heard good things about, both from BookTube and my friends in real life who have read it. And it's about a thief in like I think the 18th century Cairo, who ends up summoning a djinn, and I think there's some kind of like travel between Cairo and like a mystical world, and I don't know a ton of details obviously about what this book is about, but I do think just like the Egypt inspired fantasy sounds interesting, and again, I've heard a lot of good things, so I'm excited to pick this one up. Next, all 3 of the books left are all sequels on series I have open, and they're just ones that I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to go back to that series, make some progress on them. So the first of those is The Burning Page by Genevieve Cogman. This series follows Irene, who is a librarian with a capital L, and the library houses like important magical books and things from different dimensions and different worlds and different times, and so she like is tasked with going out and like retrieving items for the library. If you've ever heard of the TV show Warehouse 13 that was on the Sci-Fi Channel years ago, which was one of my favorite TV shows, it kind of has a similar vibe to that show, but a little bit more magical and less grounded in Earth like that show is. But I've been enjoying it. This is book 3. So I've had this and the 4th book on my shelves for a couple months now, and I'm, just ready to get back and see what Irene gets up to in her next adventure. Next, I have The Queen of Attolia by Megan Whalen Turner. This is the 2nd book in the Queen's Thief series. I read The Thief January, and I liked it enough to want to give the 2nd book a shot, but have not been totally sold on the series. But I have heard that the 1st book is the weakest, which is also part of why I'm compelled to at least give the 2nd one a shot, because they're not super long either, and I liked it enough that I'm not turned off by the idea of reading the 2nd one, so I figured I'd give the 2nd one a shot. This series follows Jen, who's the like best thief in the world, and in book 1 he's in prison and he's like promised release if he can steal this really hard to steal item, and that's kind of just the basic premise of book 1. I didn't love book 1, but I really liked the end of book 1, and the end kind of set what the end felt like it was setting up was more interesting to me than most of book 1, which is also why I'm interested in at least giving book 2, because if it goes more in that direction, I think I will like the rest of the series, so we will see. And the last book on my TBR for July is Jade War by Fonda Lee. This is the sequel to Jade City. I meant to pick this up in May as part of a buddy read, but then I just didn't. It happens. And so I want to pick this up definitely before the 3rd book comes out later this year. And so this series takes place in a fictionalized kind of Asian-inspired setting. It's kind of a mob family fantasy story where jade is kind of dealt with as both a drug as well as it's what gives people powers. and people with powers are kind of the leaders of the mob, and there's these two mob families that are fighting over kind of territory and Jade in this main city. And so I quite enjoyed the first one, and I'm definitely excited to see where the second one goes. So that's my haul and July TBR. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them. And if you've read any of the books from my haul that you think I should read soon, you should let me know, and maybe I will pick them up next month. And that is all for this video, and I will see you in my next one.